Hello Year 2. So last time when we were reading our story, The Twits by Roald Dahl, we read that Mr. Twit made Mrs. Twit believe that she had the shrinks. So he convinced her that she was shrinking and getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and in the end would just end up as a pile on the floor. So he told her that the way to cure the shrinks was to get her stretching. So he got hundreds of balloons and he tied them to the upper part of her body, and then he tied her ankles to an iron ring on the ground. And so let's see what happens next. Okay, our chapter is called Mrs. Twit Goes Ballooning Up. "There's enough pull here to take me to the moon," Mrs. Twit cried out. "To take you to the moon?" exclaimed Mr. Twit. "What a ghastly thought! We wouldn't want anything like that to happen. Oh, dear me, no." "We most certainly wouldn't," cried Mrs. Twit. "Put some more string around my ankles quickly. I want to feel absolutely safe." "Very well, my angel," said Mr. Twit, and with a ghoulish grin on his lips, he knelt down at her feet. He took a knife from his pocket and with one quick slash he cut through the strings holding Mrs. Twit's ankles to the iron ring. She went up like a rocket. "Help!" she screamed. "Save me!" But there was no saving her now. In a few seconds she was high up in the blue sky and climbing fast. Mr. Twit stood below looking up. "What a pretty sight," he said to himself. "How lovely all those balloons look in the sky, and what a marvellous bit of luck for me. At last the old hag is lost and gone forever." And there's an illustration of Mr. Twit snipping off the strings which attach Mrs. Twit to the iron ring, which is sending her up like a rocket into the sky. Okay, our next chapter is called Mrs. Twit Comes Ballooning Down. Mrs. Twit may have been ugly and she may have been beastly, but she was not stupid. High up there in the sky, she had a bright idea. "If I can get rid of some of these balloons," she said to herself, "I will stop going up and start to come down." She began biting through the strings that held the balloons to her wrists and arms and neck and hair. Each time she bit through a string and let the balloon float away, the upward pull got less and her rate of climb slowed down. When she had bitten through 20 strings, she stopped going up altogether. She stayed still in the air. She bit through one more string. Very, very slowly, she began to float downwards. It was a calm day. There was no wind at all, and because of this, Mrs. Twit had gone absolutely straight up. She now began to come absolutely straight down. As she floated gently down, Mrs. Twit's petticoat billowed out like a parachute, showing her long knickers. It was a grand sight on a glorious day, and thousands of birds came flying in from miles around to stare at this extraordinary old woman in the sky. Our next chapter is called Mr. Twit Gets a Horrid Shock. Mr. Twit, who thought he had seen his ugly wife for the last time, was sitting in the garden celebrating with a mug of beer. Silently, Mrs. Twit came floating down. When she was about the height of the house above Mr. Twit, she suddenly called out at the top of her voice, "Here I come, you grisly old grunion! You rotten old turnip! You filthy old frumpat!" Mr. Twit jumped as though he'd been stung by a giant wasp. He dropped his beer. He looked up, and there's an illustration of a horrified Mr. Twit. He gaped, he gasped, he gurgled. A few choking sounds came out of his mouth. And there's an illustration showing what happened next. "I'll get you for this," shouted Mrs. Twit. She was floating down right on top of him. She was purple with rage and slashing the air with her long walking stick, which she had somehow managed to hang on to the whole time. "I'll swish you to a swazzle," she shouted. "I'll swash you to a swizzle. I'll nash you to a nozzle. I'll nosh you to a nazzle." And before Mr. Twit had time to run away, this bundle of balloons and petticoats and fiery fury landed right on top of him, lashing out with the stick and cracking him all over his body. Our next chapter is called The House, the Tree and the Monkey Cage. But that's enough of that. We can't go on forever watching these two disgusting people doing disgusting things to each other. We must get ahead with the story. Here is a picture of Mr. and Mrs. Twit's house and garden. Some house? It looks like a prison and not a window anywhere. Who wants windows? Mr. Twit had said when they were building it. Who wants every Tom, Dick and Harry peeping in to see what you're doing? It didn't occur to Mr. Twit that windows were meant mainly for looking out of, not for looking into. And what do you think of that ghastly garden? Take another look at the ghastly garden. Mrs. Twit was the gardener. She was very good at growing thistles and stingy nettles. "I always grow plenty of spiky thistles and plenty of stingy nettles," she used to say. "They keep out nasty, nosy little children." Near the house you can see Mr. Twit's work shed. To one side there is the big dead tree. It never has any leaves on it because it's dead. And not far from the tree you can see the monkey cage. There are 4 monkeys in it. They belong to Mr. Twit. You will hear about them later. See if you can spot the cage with 4 monkeys in. Have you spotted it? Okay. So tomorrow we are going to read the chapter called Hug Tight Sticky Glue. Have a little think. What do you think is going to happen in the next part of our story? Try and make your predictions and come back tomorrow to see if your predictions are correct. Hope you're all staying safe, you too, and hope to see you soon. Missing you loads. Bye bye.